For the last 4 or 5 years, we were shopping for a on-premise storage device.
We'd been looking at different options in different companies and looking at systems that we were going to design using different servers and different products.
Our executive director, Dan Entwistle, I think he was traveling and saw it in Church Executive Magazine, an article about their platform and their company. So that's kind of how the ball started rolling at the time.
And we started looking into this and seeing how simplified the management was and how collaborative it could be, and it seemed to check all the boxes for what we were looking for with a more simplified design that we wouldn't have to manage as intensely as some of the other options.
So when we kind of came down to a couple of primary options, Creative Space was looking really good at the time. The people who created Creative Space, they are amazing. They're highly technical. They know their product, and they see a future beyond what just storage or shared storage is about today.
And I bought in after I'd been on a couple meetings with Creative Space and did some more research and read up on things and saw how simplified and streamlined the management was. And it works a little bit differently than what I'm used to, because instead of managing servers and users and Active Directory and all these things that typically come along with IT infrastructure, it was a little bit more hands-off, where I designed a network and made sure we had the routing between all the things that needed to have access to different things. And then it just kind of worked. And in these meetings, it sounded kind of like too big of a promise of, oh yeah, just make your users, here's this, here's the software that goes on your Macs that automatically mounts these drives. It sounded a little bit crazy, but that's kind of how it's been working. And from my perspective, it's a little bit more hands-off.
So what we find appealing is the technology behind what their people are creating. And that's really this component of finding media, digging into an editor's process, finding all the metadata around that media and content, and make it available to not only the editors themselves, but also the people that are the teams and the people that are on the Creative Space platform. Before Creative Space, primarily all of our media content was on RAID arrays. We had a lot of archive footage that was on network drives, but the network drives were rather slow. They weren't 10 gigabit accessible. We couldn't edit from them directly, so whatever was on network drives was just shared from one desktop to another to those RAID arrays.
Some people would need more storage and some people had plenty, but we'd have to upgrade certain people's to get the amount of storage that they needed. And the collaboration, there was a lot of dragging files from one hard drive to another for someone to work on and then dragging them back. And we had multiple storage arrays in our data center that weren't really designed for editing directly off of over the network. So the collaboration piece was kind of a mess, but we'd often have to find more storage to be able to just store all the stuff that we had.
It was not like a centralized storage. So each of the Macs had to be on in order to make their shareable connection. Sometimes they wouldn't come up if the permissions weren't right. And then we're still just moving content from each editor to actually work on it rather than having it in a shared centralized space.
A lot of times we work on some really tight deadlines for revisions, and so the speed of download often was killing us.
So moving content around was slow, actually. Even though it was gigabit Ethernet, we couldn't really access the media and edit from the media.
We're running pretty large files, in the neighborhood of 18 gigabyte files. And previously, I was looking at 15 to 20 minute download time. You're kind of watching the progress bar and you're watching the clock, seeing that drop dead time come. It's kind of a nervous time.
And what Creative Space has let us do is have one centralized place for all this video content and for us to edit directly off of that, so we can share that big pool of storage together instead of having to upgrade individual hard drives and pass these files around and potentially lose things.
So we've literally gone from 15 to 18 minutes down to about 2 minutes. So anytime we can pick up a few extra minutes here and there, it is a major stress reducer, not to mention actually being able to get everything loaded and running on time.
Now we're able to kind of keep things in one spot. We can access it faster. We're no longer shuttling USB drives or finding content on old legacy tape drives. We can put all that media on the server, and right now we've got 192 terabytes of space allocated to that. So, over time we can just expand that as we need to. The price point, even though it's a 3-year commitment, depending on what you do with it, we'll see that over time easily, like within this year, I can see. And so, we've been able to really increase our productivity, get to media quicker and access it in our editors quicker. And the ease of use of the software more than anything else is just, I don't need my IT department to always manage the stuff. I could get in there and create spaces, create teams and roles and user permissions. I don't need to get into the language of information technology in order to administer it.
It just kind of works without really having to spend a lot of time troubleshooting and diagnosing stuff. And there's a lot of stuff in the network infrastructure world that just isn't that way. And then it takes a bunch of time of troubleshooting that, or being on the phone with support in another country trying to diagnose why our specific hardware isn't working the way that it was supposed to. Especially after my last week of fighting site-to-site VPN stuff, I just kind of wish more things worked as simply as Creative Space has.